Hello world, welcome to the second video in my personal finances playlist. I'm a Python programmer and this is a Python programming channel. However, a lot of my friends and family have asked me to do a personal finance series and they kind of bullied me into this. If you just finished watching the first video, thank you. And yes, I do have a beard and that's because I've been teleworking for the past 2 weeks. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing something called insolvency. And so in the first video, and I'll put a link to the description if you haven't seen that yet, I do recommend watching that. We talked about basic personal finances, basic to intermediate, and a lot of those recommendations may seem out of reach to people who are struggling. And so that whole video just might seem unrealistic and unattainable. And usually people get pretty upset when it's some of that vanilla advice that you just can't meet because you're in a situation called insolvency. Now, I am not a certified financial planner, and insolvency can be a slippery slope that can be difficult to get out of. But I want to give you some just educational material, and I do recommend you do your own diligence. So when we talk about insolvency, let's discuss what that is. So insolvency is where your income or your expenses repeatedly exceeds your income. Or the vice versa is where your income suddenly drops, like what we're experiencing now with the coronavirus and its implications on the job market, but your expenses stay constant or even increase. So if we look at this little chart I made with fictional data, let's say you started off this year, January, February, you have just enough income to meet your expenses. Okay, so you're living paycheck to paycheck, which a lot of people um, live like. And then March happens, and something happens to your car, or you have a large financial bill, or your kid needs braces, or something like dramatic like this, where coronavirus happens. Then your expenses start to increase over your income that you make. Now, many of us cannot control our income unless you're working on a commission. So every day we get paid the same. So in April, let's say you have to use your credit card to get you to the next month, right? To make up the difference that your income doesn't make. Well, the next month, you're going unless something changed, you're going to have the same expenses. You're going to have to put that on debt and the interest starts to pile up quick, right? So the interest adds to the new debt and it starts to snowball out of control. Now, while I created a straight line because of I didn't put too much effort into this small chart. I could if I wanted to, but what it happens is it's exponential. So watch my mouse, it comes up at a slope. And while it takes a long time to save money, it takes almost no time to get into a snowball of debt problems. And eventually, when all of your debts start to compare to your income, once that debt to income ratio exceeds 50%, then you start having to look at possible bankruptcy, right? So, and then another way of looking at this is if nothing changes in the next 1 to 3 years, right? Nothing changes, will your debt continue to increase? So, if you face either of those two, you may have to consider bankruptcy, or you can watch the rest of this video and I hope I can give you some tips to try to avoid that. So, let's go over some of the things we're going to talk about. So this is what I was talking about. Let me move my face. So this is Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps. This is what a lot of people shoot for, or some of the recommendations in my first video. So as I'm talking in my first video, if you're just shaking your head like, no, that's not right. Yeah, right. I can't meet those. Or even here, step 1 is to save $1,000. If that seems like a ridiculous amount, then that's why I'm making this video and that's why I'm going to recommend some, give you a checklist of how I would approach and how I've helped a lot of people with insolvency. This is where I'm truly passionate. Telling people who already have money how to do better with their money is fun, but helping people who are in this insolvent situation is what I've helped done for the last 20 years because this is how I joined the Air Force. Zero money, almost no clothing to my name, nothing. I had zero. I had a negative actually. And so I didn't get any of this information. I had to learn for myself. So hopefully this helps somebody else. So the first thing we're going to do, just like anybody, we're going to review our expenses. Then we're going to dispel a common myth and do something called focus fire on debt payments. Then we're going to adjust our tax situation, which is controversial, but we'll talk about that. Then we'll look at some debt consolidation, which is kind of tricky. And then we'll explore some new ideas, but I'll give you some cautionary tips for each one of those. So first, let's look at reviewing expenses. So what I did was I made this little chart right here. And from the top to the bottoms, I'm going to start off with the easiest ones that require very minimal life changes. Then we'll go into some challenging and some hard and difficult major life changes. So the first one are your variable expenses. These are the ones you have full control over and you can cut them or add to them whenever you please. The first one's dining out. All of us can dine out less. It's become a part of our culture, but you can always find savings here. Entertainment, depending on how stressful your job is, you might want to, you know, reduce entertainment if it's too stressful. Maybe this isn't the best place. Travel, if you like to travel every paycheck, you might want to reduce that. And you have to reduce these until you're back to solvency. Once you're back to solvency, you can add some of these back in. Then we start getting into the more challenging parts, which are your variable, which at any time you can cut, but they're kind of fixed in the fact that, especially if you're married with kids, you have to have these in some way. You don't have to dine out. You don't have to have entertainment or travel, but you do have to have groceries, right? And so, whatever your max grocery bill is, find ways to save it. Maybe you can buy some less expensive commodities. Maybe you can choose less expensive options of meals. A lot of us who didn't have a lot of money growing up, we call it the Hormel chili and ramen diet. I'm not saying go that far, those have some health implications. But to get out of solvency, you might want to consider that. Clothing. So you might not need to. Some businesses like to require certain clothing standards, and you might have to double up on clothing, wear the same shirt twice a week. It's uncomfortable and it doesn't fit our culture, but getting out of your insolvency should be your top priority. And then we start getting into some more challenging one, which is services like phones, internet, and TV. So this will require a family decision if you have married and with kids. You have to have phones, but maybe not the unlimited data plan, maybe not the best internet, and which is a hard decision right now with the coronavirus, since a lot of schooling and a lot of us are absorbing a lot of internet activities. Same with utilities. These aren't probably the best place for big savings, but you can find savings if you're smart about your electricity, water, and gas usage. And depending on the state, like California, New York, you might be able to find large savings by cutting these down. And then we get into the fixed expenses, and these require major life changes. So, rent and mortgage. Maybe you live in too nice of a house or too nice of an apartment, and you may need to leave that and move in with a roommate or something, or get a roommate. So these are major life changes. Car payments. So maybe you have too nice of a car and maybe you have to sell that and get a newer car. Now these don't generate new savings right away, but over the long term they will. And then minimum payments on your debt. So you're going to have to reduce them all the way down to the minimum payments. And I know people say, "Oh no, you should try to, not do your minimum payments," and that's true, and we'll discuss that next. And so what I like to recommend is this focus fire approach. So what I basically mean is stop rounding. It's an old financial myth where they said, "Oh, if you just round up on all your debt and you'll get out of debt quickly." And unfortunately, you're only talking about $2 or $3 on each debt. And so it's not going to add up quickly, but it can if you stop rounding on all your debts and focus on the lowest balance. So I did a sample hypothetical scenario here where these are realistic minimum payments: $28.30, $127.80, $43.50. You know what I mean? And a lot of people round up. It's easier to write, it's easier to type if you're paying online, and you should stop that if you're in this insolvent scenario. So in this scenario, if we were to stop rounding and went down to the minimum payment, you would generate 20 extra dollars. And then you would take this 20 extra dollars and put it towards the lowest balance. So let's say this credit card number one had the lowest balance. You would put the minimum payment down plus this $20 and you'd have $48, right? And as soon as that balance is paid off, you would use that $48 to, I assume in my scenario, this credit card 3. So you would have the 48 here plus this 43 here, right? And I think you'd have 91. And that's how you create and change the snowball in your favor, right? You hit each lowest balance with the previous minimum payment you were paying, and it just keeps going quicker and quicker. So this is my first recommendation after reviewing expenses. The second one is to focus fire on payments. Seems small, but mathematically this is what you should do. That's why Dave Ramsey's baby steps help so many people, because it focuses you on one goal. Number one, get an emergency savings fund. So whatever money people generate just goes to that. And that's how you mathematically reach your financial goals. But that's small dollars. So if you're truly insolvent to the tune of 50, 100, 150 or more, then you have to do this next step, and that is to adjust your tax situation. And this is controversial. We are not taught this in school, and it's just the way we look at it. Most people who are struggling financially, at least in my experience over the last 2 decades, they usually get large tax refunds. And what I mean by large is over 1,000, but what I usually see is 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. And it's super rare that people actually use that end of year tax refund to get into a better financial position. What they realistically do is spend it on a large commodity like furniture or a new car or something that only adds or complicates their financial situation. If you are in an insolvent position, you need to increase your monthly income. There's two ways to do that. So there's two scenarios on why you might be receiving a large tax refund. The first is that you have too much taxes taken out each month because you're claiming single and zero. So what you need to do is, depending on how your company does it, you either need to go see HR in person or go online. For me, I'm in the military. We have an online system that we can adjust our W-4 withholdings or exemptions. So if you are claiming single and zero and you're married with kids, my first recommendation is either go to married, go from single to married and add one exemption, and then look at your next paycheck. Does that seem way too much, like you're getting way too much and you might have to owe? I'm not sure. It depends on your current income and how much is taken out, stuff like that. But if you add married in one, or just one if you're a single person, and only a couple dollars was generated, then increment it by another one and see what happens the next paycheck. So another scenario that's very common is people get the earned income credit and they don't get it until the end of the year. So this is where people get into now the new child tax credit itself is 2,000, but the earned income credit only keeps getting larger. And that's how you see people who don't make a lot of money get $5,000 plus tax refunds. The majority of it is this earned income credit. So if you're insolvent, it makes no sense to wait to the end of the year. So what you can do is the same process as scenario one, is you can go to HR or go online and change your W-4 and claim advanced earned income credit. It's called AEIC. And it's on your W-4 options to claim this. And what I recommend is go to last year's tax refund, and there's a block that says earned income credit. It's different for the different types of forms, so 1040EZ, 1040, 1040A. Find the earned income credit, and let's say it was $2,000 or $2,400, so I can do the math on this video without embarrassing myself. So let's say you got $2,400 in earned income credit. Divide by 12 and adjust your W-4 to get $200 each month back in advanced earned income credit. So these are just two scenarios. The first one was adjust your withholdings slash exemptions, and the next one is to claim advanced income credit. Now, big warning though that this is kind of an advanced professional recommendation. I've done it. I've helped people personally for the last 2 decades, but if you don't do it right, you may end up owing. Now, a side note though is a lot of wealthy people or people who are financially independent, they get kind of excited when their tax refund is below 500 or even if they owe less than $500 or less. In our minds, I do well. I won if I have less than $500 or even if I owe a little bit. I feel like I won against the man, if you will. So if you're used to this larger tax refund, you might want to do these two scenarios with a professional and see what kind of money you can garner. All right, so the next one is to consolidate your debt. Let's say you can't do either or you're not comfortable adjusting your tax situation. The next, you might have to consider consolidating your debt, especially if a lot of your debt is credit cards. They have insane interest rates, and there are different places to find ways to consolidate your debt. So there's Lending Club or other peer-to-peer lending sites where even if you have poor credit, now if you have very poor credit, you might not, Lending Club might not allow you. But let's say you just have some average credit, then their interest rates are anywhere from like 6 to 13%. And the way they do this is they cut up your, let's say you have $2,000 balance, they cut up your debt into $25 increments and give it to investors like me. I have a Lending Club investor account, and then it loans you the money. So in this scenario, you see these super large 20+% interest rates. Your goal is to consolidate these into one loan that's 6 to 13%. Now be careful, there are some predatory loan consolidation sites that have hidden fees that by the end of it you will pay more through this debt consolidation place than you would have if you just kept the interest rate. All they do is help you lower the interest rate. And the way they do that is they take the risk themselves and extend the date of the loan, and they get to earn more money, and by the end of it you think you won. The second cautionary tale is some debt consolidation agencies file the same way to the credit bureau as filing a bankruptcy. So that's why I'm recommending these peer-to-peer lending sites. Another way is go to a bank and see if you qualify for a personal loan. Some of these personal loans are half the interest rates of these, like 14, 15%. Or then see if you do have a 401k, see if you can take a loan out of it. You do have to pay, some companies charge you a percentage to yourself and you don't get to recoup that money. And so it kind of sucks, and usually this is the last step, is taking out your 401k. But if you're insolvent and you're possibly looking at bankruptcy, then your 401k is not going to help you if you have to go bankrupt. Which brings me, so that's what debt consolidation is. So you have all of these, you look at all these, and you look at the way high interest rates. In this case, and in most cases, they're credit cards, and you want to consolidate those. So if you have taken payday loans, that's another one to consolidate. Those payday loans come with a, if you look at the annual percentage rate, right? That's the little font in, it's in 2 font at the very bottom. They actually have 100, 200, 360% interest rates, but the one they quote you when you get it is a 2-week payback interest rate. So if you see 18%, you're like, sweet, that's cheaper than my credit cards. Just realize that's a 2% or 2-week, sometimes even 1 week in some states that don't have anti-predatory laws. But just realize that is a bi-week or bi-weekly or bi-month or bi-month interest rate. And so you need to calculate the APR, and you can find that by law in the size 2 font at the bottom. But either way, payday loans and credit card loans are good sources to consolidate debt, and here are some recommendations. So the next thing to do is explore other ideas, and the purpose of this is to somehow create more income, but be cautious with this. So the first thing to do is stop your investments temporarily. So a lot of people, while facing insolvency, are still contributing to their 401k, or they're still putting maybe $50 a month into a Robinhood account, or have some automated treasury bonds plan, and they think that this is a better return while they go insolvent and claim bankruptcy, and that's not true. So stop those 401k or IRA contributions. Stop the little money you're putting in Robinhood and pay off those debts and become solvent again. Now, the caution here is once you stop investing, it's difficult to get back into it. So once your body is used to living with that money, then your mind will start to see it and it's easier to spend it than it is to restart those savings. So just mentally know that you will have to start those back up once you're solvent. Next is to get a side gig. So I know we all work hard, but if you're facing insolvency, you might have to work a little harder. I like the website Penny Hoarder only for finding side gigs like medical transcription or user testing for websites. They are clickbait and affiliates, which means they um, get you to their site primarily so you can click on links to sign up. But they do have some great ideas to earn additional income. Now, what a lot of people do is they do multi level marketing or pyramid schemes or affiliate, which are just called funnel systems, which means you just funnel money upwards. It's also a pyramid. Note that these have nearly 99% failure rate. And I've seen that quote everywhere. I think it's way higher. I know very few people who succeed with MLMs and affiliates. So just realize that a quick side gig, official side gig, might generate a lot more money than an MLM or affiliate. And a lot of those MLMs and affiliates automatically come with fixed expenses. Like you have to have a website, you have to throw at least one party, all of these things. 99% failure rate. I'm not against them because I know I'll get MLM hate in my comments, but I'm just saying be cautious. Sell the things you're no longer using. This is a quick way to generate a quick burst of cash, maybe not recurring. So you'll want to quickly pay off those debts. So just don't get into what's called the broke person cycle, where you buy things that you don't need at full cost. You get into a bad position, you sell them at a fire sale low, and then you start rebuying other things at full cost. It's this non-stop broke person cycle. And on the other side of that cycle is a wealthy or financially independent cycle, who they avoid buying things at full cost, wait for garage sales or for people to sell things at low, and then keep that stuff so they don't have to rebuy things at full cost. So those are the two things. You have to get your mind to where the wealthy or financially independent are. The next one, and I kind of put these in order, and I don't mean to offend, but you could ask a church or outside organization for help. So if you're super religious, you might think this should be at the top, but just be aware that a lot of these come with hooks or hidden paybacks, where churches or outside organizations will use extreme measures to get you to pay it back in some way, whether that's your time or something in kind. So if they say, yeah, we're here to help, and you've tithed for 5 years and then you need help, it might come with a hook. And I don't mean that pejoratively to churches or outside organizations. I'm just saying be aware of those hooks. So lastly, and I mean this lastly, and I think most certified financial planners will concur, and I don't mean to knock people's families or friends, but as a last resort, seek help from your family or friends. But just know that usually, and this has been true in my life and in most of my friends' life, that mixing your family and friend life with your personal finance life can cause irreparable damage to relationships. So in our culture, at least on Western cultures, they do not mix. And I notice that people rather talk about religion and politics than talk about personal finances with their friends and family. But if you are truly struggling, this might be your last resort. And stay away from payday loans. I already talked about it, but it is a slippery slope that I can't help you with. And once you start down that route, I usually have to say you have to file for bankruptcy because it is punishing. I don't know why it's still legal in America. It comes at a huge cost. So stay away from those payday loans. So I hope this helps somebody. Um, insolvency is very scary, and the normal knee jerk reaction is not to ask for help, and it should be the opposite. So I hope I help somebody. Leave a comment if this has helped you, and thank you for watching. And like this video and subscribe to my channel if you are okay with waiting patiently for personal finance videos or you like Python programming. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, world.